residential tech jobs, lighting specialist, residential tech.
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Joe Borress joins us from Malibu, California, where he's founder and president of TriStar Electric and Automation. Our guest today grew up immersed in high-end New York City construction projects as a third-generation electrical contractor. He spent the early decades of his career navigating and troubleshooting complex job sites, working with clients and renowned architects in the ultra-luxury residential markets of New York City, the Hamptons, and Greenwich, Connecticut. Then in 2013, drawn to California's sunshine and quality of life, Joe and his family moved from the East Coast to Malibu, where he has established his company as a sought-after designer and consultant in the most exclusive areas of Southern California, combining his qualifications as an electrical contractor, lighting designer, and low-voltage integrator. Joe Borress, thanks for joining us today to talk about your career and to share your industry insights.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing intro, and I really appreciate it. It's exciting to be with you, and I'm looking forward to talking.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, even more than a lot of them, just because I don't know you personally, and I'm going to be finding out a lot just by talking to you here for the podcast, which is great, very spontaneous. And I do want to get into your industry insights, but it's really rare for me to meet someone who's an accomplished low voltage integrator. That's typical for me, but also has the electrical contractor experience that you do. And you throw in the lighting designer part of it. And lighting installation and design is such a new and exciting part of our industry that you've kind of become the triple threat for me. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. But before we get into all of it, I want to talk about your upbringing as a third generation electrical contractor. In your bio, it says that from a young age, you were passionate about learning the trade and understanding how things worked. How far back do you recall being interested in tech and the electrical trade of your father and your grandfather?
Sure. So it's crazy because, now being 52, when I look back at my entire work career, it really started in the fourth grade. And I specifically remember the actual day. I lived in Staten Island at the time, and I was a young kid. And I was playing outside during recess. And I look over and I see my father. And every kid that sees his dad at school is kind of nervous, like, oh my God, what's my dad doing here? And he was with somebody that worked for him. His name is Anthony. And I ran over to him. I said, Dad, what's going on? What are you doing? And they were working on the lighting for the outside of the play area, the pool, or I don't really remember exactly what it was. I know there's something to do with the pool. And that was when I first kind of just got intrigued, like, oh my God, you're fixing something you have to do with lighting, and it was just really intriguing to me. And that's when I started to, wanted to go to work with my dad when I had a day off of school, or, some days over the summer. And then I had the opportunity to work with my grandfather, which was wild because, he was very old school, very tough New Yorker. And this may be off topic, but I'd love to share the story is that, my father let me work with him during the day, no big deal. And I was a young kid. I don't know how old I was, maybe 12. And we were in New York City, if you remember, because I know you used to live there. There was little elevators that would take you from the basement up to the sidewalk, and there were these big grates that kind of open up. And I remember standing on the sidewalk, and as the elevator comes up, I said, "Oh my God, Grandpa, you're bleeding," and he was bleeding from his head. And, he must have done something downstairs as he was coming up on the ladder, whatever the case was. And he takes out his handkerchief, very old school, New York, Brooklyn, tough man. And he pulls out his handkerchief. I remember he does like that. And he puts it on his head and he just keeps working. There was no stopping, not even skipping a beat. And that was just the kind of guy he is. So I was surrounded by these type of stories. I have thousands of them. Being with the men, being in the field, being against the odds in construction and trying to navigate New York City and these buildings and housing projects to, type A buildings where you're in meetings with Bank of America and just completely wild little scenarios. And I think when I started getting into the industry and I started working as a young 20-year-old, 21-year-old, I felt like I had a lot to prove because, I had the opportunity to get a job from my father. I mean, I'm not going to ever deny that. I didn't, pound the pavement. I asked for a job and he gave me one at $5 an hour and I started at 5 a.m. That was just how it went. So I had that opportunity, which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But I had to keep that. I wasn't the boss's son in my eyes. I was like, I got to prove myself to these 20, 30, 40-year-olds that I'm working under, because I don't want to be this young little kid. So I was the first one to, get my hands dirty, first one to open my mouth when I had a question, first one to go to school at night, to get into the apprenticeship program. Like, I was just all over it because I felt like I had no choice, instead of just like kind of just riding my way out, and that's really what was the best education ever, is to be in it, to do it. And to this day, that experience, all these years later, 30 years later, it's like it was yesterday. When you're in the field, whether you're an integrator, electrical contractor, plumber, it doesn't really matter. When you know what it is to bring wire into a building, take a delivery, deal with the freight elevator guy, how to get into a loading dock, how to navigate not saying certain things if maybe the property manager doesn't know something, or you have to watch what you say. So there's the educated aspect to it. Then you obviously, what's in the scope of work, what's included, where's overtime, what are working hours, noisy hours, all these things that I've learned over the years, just like anything else, gives you experience and really helps you, just be a better businessman.
And I know from talking to my friends that have integration companies, and they're not electricians, they're just, low voltage folks, but they just, some of the basics of New York City businesses is the parking. I mean, things like getting in from wherever your location is. Yeah. The logistics are a level above everything else in the country that you have to deal with. I'm sure there are other similar cities, maybe Chicago or somewhere like that, where you have dealings like that, but New York is uniquely difficult to
100%. And I think that's what actually helped me in California as I was growing my business out here, is the ease of doing business is only easy to me, or easier to me, because I know what it is to not have it easy and to be more difficult. So, I tell the story all the time. The first project that I got in California in a commercial space, it was for a record company, and I pulled up to the circular driveway of the high-rise, type A building in Wilshire and Fairfax. And I ran inside like in a panic that my car is going to get towed, but it's not. I mean, it's in a beautiful area, right? Museums everywhere. And I introduced myself to the doorman, and he says, "Oh yeah, we're expecting you. Please pull your truck down into the parking lot. You'll see so-and-so. He'll give you a parking spot. This guy will take you up in the freight elevator. He'll open up the suite for you and let me know if you need anything." And I did all that. But in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute. You mean I can actually come into your building, park, go inside an elevator, go upstairs, go into the suite, and actually start my job? I said, in New York, that's a 3-day job right there. Your insurance is wrong. Nobody knew you were coming. They didn't give us proper clearance. There's, freight elevator hours, no deliveries after 8. All that stuff is now taken out the window. And I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Well, take us back a little bit to your early career before we get to California and how well established you've gotten there. So you worked for your dad, and you're doing these projects. You do an apprentice education, which is part of obviously the electrical trade. Did you also take college classes at one point? It looked like you did.
Yeah, I was in college for a couple of years. I went to school at the University of Hartford, and then I was out in college in Tampa for a while, but they weren't trade related. That was more about just me, getting the standard education for liberal arts. And I really didn't know why I actually went to college, and I think about that sometimes now, even as an older adult, is that I didn't have the guidance from my particular school that I went to say, hey, Joey, what are you interested in? It was like, I remember that specific incident too, when we had to go see our guidance counselor to talk about our next education path. My interest in construction didn't really come up. It was like, okay, well, you're going to college. What do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. They said, okay, great. Liberal arts next. And it was like that. And I was like, wow, I wish you would have talked to me about my interest, about my trade. I played music too. I know how to play guitar and drums, not well, but it's fun for me. And so who knows where I could have been interested in, instead of just going to take simple classes and not having them directed towards really what my passions were. But so I dropped out of college early, prior to my 4-year degree. and I just wanted to start working. And that's where that 5 in the morning, $5 an hour opportunity came to me, because I just wanted to work. I didn't want to be 2 years old, 23 years old, getting out of school, first learning the industry. I just wanted to get into it right away. And so I just wanted to start working. And that's how it began. So, started off in the rough and tumble world of construction, working in manholes, pulling feeders into buildings, doing shutdowns, night calls, emergency calls. This is before cell phones. So I would get beeped, with a beeper, and I'll be at a restaurant. I'm in my 20s. I was out. I was having fun with my friends, and I get a call. I got to go to Queens, that a transformer blew up, or, crazy stuff like that. So I was involved with all of that, emergency work, climbing up extension ladders and housing projects and upgrading lighting and cameras for security and dealing with intercoms and just everything you could think of. And then that kind of transcended over to the years in getting into the corporate TI world, where some of the landlords that we worked for really liked what we were doing, especially because, now we had a family business going on, because my dad was the boss and he had his whole crew. And my father never worked in the field at this stage of his life, but he ran the company. And then my brother and I were coming into the industry too. So now we were looked at as this great little family unit, and that got us into the corporate world. So I started working for Club Med, doing their TIs, trading firms, law firms, advertising agencies, lobby upgrades, turnstiles. Then 9/11 happened, and we did all sorts of million jobs after 9/11. We had guys actually in Jersey City that we unfortunately had to transport by boat to one of our clients who had a residential complex called Battery Park City, where half the building was blown up. I mean, it was horrible, where, inside we had to do temporary lighting, and, we didn't go through the rubble. I'm not trying to paint the picture that we were saving lives or anything, but we did restore power to these buildings and do the renovation after the weeks of September 11th. So all this stuff happened. So as I was on these jobs, the low voltage guy would come on the job. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that because they were pulling wire and I was pulling wire. I'm the electrical contractor on these jobs. And don't forget, this is back in the 90s where the word integrator didn't really exist yet. Okay. They were just low voltage guys, so they were pulling Cat 3, Cat 5 was just coming out. And when they come on my experience, at least, when they would come on the job, these are big 30,000 square foot floors, multi floor high rises, 2-3 floors at a time per these, internal staircases for these big companies. We've been there for months doing all this big, heavy electrical work, fire alarm, you name it. And when the low voltage contractor come on the job, they didn't know anything. They needed to know the lay of the land. Oh, where are you bringing us power? What rooms are this? And could I borrow a ladder? And it just, after years of that, I was like, no, I'm just over this. So that's when I started really learning about low voltage. And then we started taking that work and then trying to sell ourselves as the single point of entity. Like, we're running pipe. We might as well just do it all. And we're knowledgeable about these systems now. When I started going to get certified by AMP and Ortronics at the time, and Leviton Telecom and all that kind of stuff, more in the commercial environment. So that kind of transcended me to not be afraid of a low voltage wire. Back in those days, believe it or not, an electrician would be afraid of a 2-conductor doorbell wire. Like, they're just afraid of it. Like, they may even run away from it. That's how afraid they were. There's such a disconnect between line and low voltage. And I really didn't understand why. It's wire. Like, what's the difference? Yeah. So, and it kind of made me proud to take over low voltage scope, because back in the old days, which is something that I kind of experienced as a kid, when I would go with my dad on an emergency call, he did in Brooklyn. There was in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of bingo parlors. I don't know if you ever heard that term. Where people used to play bingo. It was like a thing. I guess it's before my time, but they used to have the microphone and all sorts of public address systems and nurse call stations at hospitals. And my dad did those intercom jobs. And did that low voltage work and speakers and closed circuit TV cameras back in the old days with RG59 cabling. So it wasn't, I don't know, I guess I did it because, it wasn't like unheard of, back then they were all hungry for work too. So if they would have asked my father if he knows how to wire a spaceship, he would have said, yeah, of course I do. Right. And then he'd figure it out after that. So I had that kind of hunger and knowledge, thirst for knowledge. Right. So, that just kind of progressed over the years, learning about low voltage and data racks, and that got me into doing jobs for Wells Fargo and just all sorts of, data centers. Okay. Yeah. And then you when do you start working with homeowners and residences? Got it. So that was the next step. So when you're starting to do, I think, really good work in the field, and I'm making good personal connections with these CFOs of these companies, The next thing you know, I'm in their Park Avenue apartments doing their renovation, meeting their residential GCs. And that's where it all kind of started. It wasn't like all of a sudden I'll go, oh, you guys can do residential. Great. I'm going to give you a job. It was more through the relationships from these landlords or high-end tenants and, or hedge fund guys that wanted us to now work in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that
that's
makes sense.
how that transcended into that. And then I really learned a lot about the residential business. I learned how different it is.
Okay.
Not so much in New York City, but when I got out to Connecticut with Romex and plastic boxes and, that kind of understanding how the homeowner lives. And that was like kind of the next step. So, it was obviously doing apartments in New York City, like luxury apartments. Then when I moved to Connecticut, once we had our first child, we moved out there. And then I had an office in Greenwich. So I was bouncing back and forth. So I had crews in both states. And that was just how I got into the high-end luxury residential world. Then when I moved out to California, I was kind of trying to figure it out. Like, where is my next step going to be? And what I was surprised is you would think it'd just be residential, right? But it actually started off as very commercial and very retail. So once I got my network going and everybody knew me from back home, I started building those relationships because New York and LA, they're really not that far apart. A lot of people, architects, interior designers, and general contractors do have bi-coastal offices. So when I started calling on them and they were happy that I'm working out here and I built a really great team, I started doing Apple stores, H&M stores, Rodeo Drive flagship Lacoste and Pomellato jewelry and Ralph Lauren and Rolex and Peloton and all these kind of like flagship retail stores. And then it dawned upon me, I said, I got these jobs off the ground and they're all like perfect. I think our work is perfect. Okay. But as the bidding kept going on and things get more competitive out here in LA, I didn't really bring as much to the table if you're just doing what's on the drawings, because then it just comes time to, in the commercial world, is like, who's least expensive? And so I started to walk away from those opportunities because I felt like I didn't really bring value to those jobs. It was the luxury residential spaces where I bring value. I bring my lighting design, my understanding how these wealthy people live, if it's their second or third home. I love talking to them about, how they expect to live in the home, where they listen to music, do they have kids, do they travel, what's their routine, are they light sleepers, all that kind of like psychological stuff I need to pull out of them so I can design the job properly or educate the design team that they already have in place to see how I can help. Because for you to just tell me to just do something based on the drawings, that's not really what I enjoy doing, because it's like almost like hiring an artist. I tell this story all the time. If you're really wealthy and you commission an artist to paint you something for your dining room or your entry hall for a big master painting that you're really excited about, and when the canvas showed up at the artist's house, it was paint by numbers. You would say, I'm not painting that. I mean, that's just somebody else's like connected dots. What fun is that? And that's how I feel at this stage of my career, right? So I just want to be able to be part of these jobs where I can really use my my experience, my knowledge, my understanding of the technology and design it properly, or at least tweak out the existing design to make it an epic experience, not just to throw a lot of tech into the job and make it really expensive.
Well, I want to dive into your focus on the pre-construction meetings and all of that, but first we're going to take a short break for a word from our sponsor. Today's episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by NICE, the global manufacturer of smart home security and building automation solutions. NICE is bringing together 30 years of innovation with award-winning products from Elan, Speakercraft, and Panamax to create a holistic ecosystem for builders, integrators, and consumers. Learn more about how you can create one home with one solution at go.niceforyou.com/RTT. Welcome back. We're talking with Joe Borress, founder and president of TriStar Electric and Automation in Malibu, California. Joe, you were starting to talk about your focus on asking questions, getting to know your clients, finding out what their lifestyle is before you even get into designing a system. And I read something that really caught my eye in your bio about your focus on working in the pre-construction phase and really talking to all the stakeholders, like the architects early on. And I know that's a huge, it's a thing that doesn't happen enough in the low voltage side, the CDS side of the industry. Getting in with that architect in the beginning of the project. are you finding that you're able to get in early on most of the projects and start talking about these important lifestyle questions and things like that? Is it how what's the
I would
key to
say
doing that?
maybe, yeah, it's not all the project. It's about 50%, unfortunately, but I want it to be 100% because it's required, it's necessary. So many times I have two plans that I just got this week for two residential projects. And these are big estate homes. These aren't little cookie cutter houses that nobody cares about technology, right? These are large projects, and it's just not designed properly. And I always get that feedback like, oh, well, that's just for plan check and whatever. But I don't care about that. I'll tell you why. If you're a homeowner, because this is what happens, I see this every single day. You're a homeowner. You're so excited. You got this new lot. You're a developer. You're excited. You got an architect on board. You have sometimes a structural engineer, maybe an electrical engineer if you're gonna need plan check, and you get this job. You don't really have any input. They just give you a set of drawings. You're all excited. You don't even know what they look like because you're not in the construction industry, and you get a budget from all these general contractors and subcontractors, and you think that that's going to be your price. So it's going to be $4 million, and you're all excited to build your home. But then it goes out to the integrator. Oh, that's not included. Oh, we're going to do panelized lighting. Oh, we've got to remove the local switch leads. Oh, you're not going to get credit from your electrician on that because he doesn't really feel like doing that work. That's just his price. Or, there's no talk about bringing conduits to the pool equipment for, future, connectivity for Ethernet and, landscape lighting. Just every single thing that we could throw into this job that we know you're going to have. You're going to have gates. You're going to have cameras at the gates. You're going to have, maybe a Savant system or a Control 4 system for home automation. Do you want the pool on the system? Do you not? Do we have any stud wall space for all the Lutron panels? Or is the AV rack room going to be ventilated? Is there a room to put the AV rack? Or all this stuff that we should be talking about. Are we doing invisible speakers? What size speakers? Why do we need certain size speakers over others? Do you want surround sound in this room? Where do you listen to audio? Are you an audiophile? Do you love turntables? Will it be a dedicated theater? Do you want how many zones do we need to create for lighting? I mean, I'm for obviously for lighting, but for sound and, pre-wiring for any shading or TV locations or, all that stuff. I could talk forever on that. Right. So then all of a sudden, every sentence I just said to you just now is a dollar amount. Mm. So wouldn't you rather know that you're going to spend $5 million and have no change orders than $4 million and then another 20 grand, another 10,000, another 5,000, another 16,000? It frustrates you. It delays the job. Things have to get reframed. You get so frustrated and so mad. Why is my job taking so long and cost me so much money? So you fire that contractor. Then you hire another guy and he charges you even more to undo everything that was just done. And how many times have you talked to somebody that, the house, oh my God, what a nightmare. Construction is not hard if it's done by the right people. That's it.
Yeah. So do you have partnerships with builders that you can get in earlier then?
I do. I want more because a lot of them are still, they're under the gun too. They have to deliver something for their client. It's not like they don't want to do a great job, but they're busy too. Right. So the good news is, we have a really beautiful showroom here in Malibu where I just beg you to come. I sit down with you. We talk about your job, your past job, your future job, what to look for. I go through all the different systems. I demonstrate catcher lighting and obviously all the different keypads. And what is a keypad? What does that mean, panelized lighting? Some people don't even know what that means versus RF and why we like, to have low voltage keypads. And, there's a million things that we do here. Talk about shading and pockets, for shading and what is room darkening versus blackout. I mean, everything that every integrator and lighting designer and electrical contractor have to talk about, right? And so then they go, oh my God, this is so great. Why isn't everybody doing this? Or now I understand what finishes are and what recess mount means. And, it just kind of sets the tone for the project and gets you excited about it because, I've seen too many very expensive homes, especially here in LA, West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, expensive. And it's like the same 90s construction. You have a 4-gang switch box when you first walk in, and then it's a spec home. They didn't want to spend the money, but they're not realizing that now the new homeowner is going to have to renovate or they're going to do RF products. And it doesn't change the look and the feel of the home. It's just, it seems crazy to me to still be building. The only reason why there were multiple light switches is because that was what was available at the time, right? We don't still go into a house and light a candle, right? To put a match in a candle, but that's used to what they have. Then they invented electricity, right? And then they invented dimmers, so you dim your lights. And now there's panelized lighting, so you have to have remote. It's all these things are progressing, but it hasn't caught up yet.
I see in your line of products that you sell. Lutron comes up a lot, and you mentioned Ketra, which is owned by Lutron.
Yes.
How early on did you get involved with Lutron? How important are they as a partner for you?
They're very important as a partner for us. So first of all, I have done 2 commercial spaces. It was for a high-end women's clothing company in Culver City. I did their corporate office, and I did their first retail store. And at that time, this was like 5 years ago, I think, Ketra was specified on the project by the lighting designer, and it was pre-Lutron acquisition.
Okay.
And I just loved the product. I thought it was amazing, right? It had these X2 keypads and the lighting and the color temperature, how it looked on the clothes. So when I did my showroom renovation here, I put Ketra in there. About a year later, we heard about Lutron buying Ketra, and I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And I was so proud of myself because I was already a Ketra dealer at the time. But I was like, wow, we are on the same page because they had the same feeling that I did. So I was forward thinking enough to, put this product in here because I loved it. It wasn't about, I can make money on it extra because I could supply it. It was, I wasn't able to buy the Ketra direct at the time because that wasn't a Lutron product. So it was kind of cool that I was on that same page. So it was very easy to get my showroom certified as a Ketra showroom in Malibu because of that. But Lutron is an amazing company. They really are an amazing company. I'm in this industry 30 years. I've dealt with a million companies, right? And I've been to their Pennsylvania R&D facility many times. I've been to all their training and just know their whole staff. And they have a saying, take care of the customer, or always take care of the customer, something like that. And it's actually true. You call up tech support, you meet a salesperson. It's just really what it's about. And they have like that New York family kind of vibe also growing up in New York. That's where their family is from. So that really transcends into a global company of what they are. So we do, we're fortunate to represent Lutron in the hospitality space. So we have been doing many of their hotels where we do the guest room controls. So we design, supply, and program the guest room controls for hotels. And then obviously, homework systems. We don't really get too involved in the radio raw products. I feel that that's, more for the retrofit line. And we're really more of a new construction company. And we love to stay with homeworks and Ketra and shading as well.
Yeah, and shading as well. I was going to ask you, that's like an important part of it. But as we talk a lot about lighting and the opportunity for lighting. And it looks like you're established in lighting fixtures as well, and you have a lighting designer pedigree. So a couple of things. First of all, did you go to training to become a lighting designer, or do you have a lighting designer that you hired for your
right? So no, yes and no. So I've been working in lighting for all these years, right? So obviously it's on the job training for 30 years, from the commercial to the retail to the residential environment, knowing all these manufacturers, physically installing these products when I was working with my tools, and really understanding layers of light, doing my own education, and then through the American Lighting Association to become a lighting associate is really where I got my accreditation from. But I feel it's kind of arrogant, and I hope it doesn't come across this way, but there's nothing like getting your hands dirty, and you could have 60 years going to dental school. But if you never worked on somebody's tooth, I don't care what kind of dentist you say you are, you're not a dentist.
Right.
So it's really important. So I think lighting designers that go to school for architecture and lighting design, they're brilliant. But they also need field practicality and input of because I'm so many jobs I've seen cut sheets on 0 to 10 volt dimming. They check the box, but they don't really know what that is and how that implicates the wiring, how it affects the lighting panels and dimming modules and access doors if we need certain things, and more modules you put in there, more RF little controls, more things can go wrong. And then do we need repeaters? So there's a lot to do with that. Like, why are you just checking off that box? Maybe you should learn about, the intelligent lighting solution by Lutron, which is the old ecosystem, which is now the new product, where you have a digital addressable system without having, and it still goes to 0.1% dim. And obviously the Ketra 2 and, companies like DMF go to 1% dimming, which is epic, So there's a lot to know, and not just about like a cut sheet. And we've had issues on projects where with a lighting designer where they specified a specific fixture, which I will not mention the name, and it was horrible to deal with, horrible to install. They couldn't meet up with the product shipping dates, so they had to send us the parts and pieces. They sent us the can, the module, the brackets. We had to basically build the fixtures on site, like as if we were like an assembly line, because they couldn't do it in-house. And then it just was a nightmare. But then they kept specifying this fixture on other projects. And I couldn't understand, after all that feedback, why would you use them again?
Right.
Because they're not having the pitfalls, and it's not costing them more money to have to figure out how to mount something under a radius of a staircase outside for a marble staircase, like all sorts of stuff like that. So
Mm.
having practical experience is what makes me specify specific brands because of they are right for the job, not just because that's just what we do or
Right.
that's the relationship I have with that particular person. There's a reason why we're specifying something.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to visit DMF last fall, and so I see how focused they are on the integration channel now. And you, with your electrical background and lighting control or lighting control, lighting design, you've gone through the early days of lighting fixtures like you're describing just now. Then you have a company that's really trying to maybe simplify it for the integrator. How important is a company like DMF and others who are really embracing the low voltage side to really kind of make this an easier process for you?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question because DMF, Lutron, and I believe it's like Lucifer and WAC and Coastal Source, and um, probably that's about it at the moment that I could think of, are doing an integrator channel of their lighting products. Not all of it. So some still go through electrical supply house
Sure.
distribution through the regular way, but then certain lines you can get through the direct dealership agreement between yourself and the manufacturer as an integrator. What I'm still trying to wrap my head around is how successful are integrators going to be getting into lighting when they don't know how to install it, wire it. They're not licensed to do it. They're not the electrical contractor on the job. So I'm still trying to figure that out. So I may be a little bit of a unicorn in the industry, and I just really hope it doesn't come across as anything except for genuine. Is
Mhm.
that when you go to CEDIA, which I've been to multiple times, you go to these tech summits, which I've been to, now you have Lightapalooza. These are all lighting companies, and I'm the only electrician in the room. And I
Mhm.
don't understand that. It's not like they're only selling, Crestron systems. And I get it, right? That's an integrator, very, kind of a bespoke brand for, the highest end integrator for programming. So the electrical contract doesn't belong in that room. I get that. But being, kind of a hybrid model myself, like I'm the audience 100%.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to figure out, and other integrators that have seen me speak on stage have come up to me and have contacted me because they need help trying to understand lighting, how to talk to the electrical contractor on the job. Do
Mhm.
they start an EC division for their own? How do they get licensed? And, what to do? Because I feel that the separation of electrician or electrical contractor and integrator for the last 15 years is slowly becoming narrowed as
Mhm.
people are now maybe taking my kind of approach to the hybrid model, or integrators now getting more into lighting and maybe starting an electrical division. But maybe in 10 or 15 years from now, there will only be one trade on the job, and that's going to be a wiring trade.
Mm.
And they're going to do everything to do with wire. That's
Well,
that's just my
I,
my opinion on that, where it's
well, I
going.
think I think I've heard some of the more informed, um, I guess, low voltage guys talk about it like this with lighting, that they are building partnerships with their electrical contractor trade partners to where they're saying, "Look, you're still doing your job. I'm just doing the specification of this product that maybe you're not necessarily that familiar with, and you're still going to do the installation, and we're gonna you're gonna make your money on that part of it, and then this um, there's a way that they're both involved. Some of them are having their own electrical part of their
Yeah, I
company.
could touch on that.
Okay.
Yes, that makes total sense. Okay. However, it most likely has to be the electrical contractor that's already been contracted for the project
Right.
because somebody has to do the service. Somebody has to do the temp light and power. Somebody has to do all the outlets. Somebody has to wire the
Sure.
appliances. Somebody's doing the Tesla charger. Somebody has to already be doing this work as contracted. Now, if you're the known integrator and you get brought onto this job super early by the design team and then you're running the whole job, then you could bring in your EC that you have a partner with and they'll get the whole project as long as the pricing and their manpower and everything, quality work, is satisfactory to the team. But I would find it hard to believe that, XYZ would be on the job as the electrical contractor Then the integrator gets brought into the job and says, no, I'm taking over the lighting package here, guys, because I do all the smarts and parts. I'm the designer. So electrician, you just do what you're doing. Forget the lighting. You don't even have to touch the lighting. I'm doing all the keypads. And then my guy who works for me, my other electrical contractor, is going to come in and do all the lighting. Right. I think there would be a weird disconnect on that because of filing for who's responsible for troubleshooting, and all that kind of stuff. So
sure. That makes sense.
I'm interested on really how they're. So the fact that they told you that's great. I just would love to learn more about how that's actually taking place.
Yeah, I would say they're probably more likely to do what you're saying, that they're partnering with the electrician on that job and just saying, look, I'm not trying to step on your toes here. We're doing a lighting design and we're going to specify the products here because we control it. And you're still going to do the installation like you're doing all the other electrical.
And I spoke about that exact topic at the Total Tech Summit. So my suggestion, though, if anybody's listening to this and they're going to go down that road, I think it's great. I just think that you need you or your team needs to learn so much about that lighting fixture package. Understand the dimensions, if it's wet location, what the dimming protocol is for the drivers, if it's for any remote drivers or anything that you need to know about, layout, stringing lines for where they're going in line with the speakers and the sprinklers, and just do your homework. That way you don't have to rely on the electrician to do anything. And if you could become the entity on the job where you really do control the lighting because you're educated about it, what kind of channel you need for the tape light and how many clips and just the whole 9 yards, then the electrician can not say anything because you know more about the job than he does at this point. And now you're the proven smart guy. So I would recommend that instead of just saying, oh yeah, the downlights will be there, figure it out. That's not going to go over well.
Let's talk a little bit more specifically about California regulations and things you deal with there from an energy standpoint. What are you doing on that in that regard? Are you dealing with a lot of solar integration in the home and trying to do energy storage, batteries, and things like that?
Yeah, so that's one area that I've always stayed away from. And the reason why is when solar first came out, it was all about like trying to sell the product to the homeowner directly. There's going to be a rebate. We're going to find out what your electric bill is and show you how much we're going to save you. And that's just never really been anything of interest in me at all. And I've stuck with that. Even the backup power stuff we do with generators, it's very, very time consuming and difficult. So we really like to just stay with the strong suit of what we are. So we just run the conduits when it has to be solar ready. Or we meet with like the battery guy and make sure we understand like where there's going to be interfaces and junction boxes and, the certain signage that has to go on our main switch gear that shows that there's a generator on property, there's solar on property. And I kind of help coordinate that with the contractor. If there's clearances, like I just kind of help, but by no means do I want to enter that world because that's just really just not, I'm not passionate about it, to be quite honest with you. The other energy stuff that we have, which every California contractor has to deal with, which is the famous Title 24 Energy Code compliance. So that really for us is more about just making sure that the fixtures that we're specifying are Title 24 compliant, the exhaust fans are Title 24 compliant, that they're JA8 compliant as far as the fixtures and the lamps to meet the energy codes for that. Certain fixtures that we have GU10, which are the bayonet like kind of bases, so you can't just put an incandescent bulb in there to satisfy the replacement of future incandescents if they buy them on eBay, things like that. And obviously vacancy sensors in the bathrooms and now in large walk-in closets it's required. So we use obviously Lutron RF vacancy sensors, or sometimes we use Faraday, which is a wired system from Europe, which they're really small kind of motion or vacancy sensors that we can also use through an interface to help match with the aesthetics. So those are like the two energy components that we're kind of involved in. So
with your obviously your background with electrical and then how you've evolved into the low voltage side of things, there as you go into the home and you're talking about the audio part of it, was there a training there that needed to take place? Since that's a lot of times that's where the low voltage guys start, as the audio side. You're interested in music, probably helps a lot there. But what was that like for you?
So it's a little bit of a learning curve because every manufacturer wants to sell you their product. So once I started getting involved with the different speaker manufacturers, it's a little overwhelming as I'm getting into that space. I find that again, I'm hoping this comes across very genuine and humble, is that they're very product focused
Mm-hmm.
on part numbers and woofer size. Like an 8-inch speaker is 11 3/4. So why is it called an 8-inch speaker? Oh, that's because of the woofer size. And I didn't get all that. And I still, after doing all these integration projects, I still don't understand it because I think it's wrong. Because you're painting a picture to an architect that they're going to have an 8-inch grill in their ceiling and they come in and it's almost a foot.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had this, like, what is that? And like, I've had this discussion. And then you have, the other manufacturers that make smaller speakers that match the light fixtures. And we all know what brands they are. But you need more of them. And then you got to add a subwoofer. And now you have more holes in your ceiling. So it's just about having that conversation. Yeah. But what is good about having access to the manufacturer's reps, they're very helpful too. Because when a client tells me something, I want really good sound, Joey. That's what I want.
Okay.
And this is where I want it. That's all I need. I'm not going to bother the client with all sorts of technical information. So that's when I rely on the manufacturer to say, listen, this is what I'm thinking about. I want to put a subwoofer here. This one, I want a sound bar in here. I want to do center, left, and right. I want 2 rears over here. This is going to be a different zone. And this is how I'm going to specify it. And, they work with me on that. And so I like to lean on the manufacturers for that, to have them triple check. And maybe, why don't we present this to the homeowner? Then maybe we'll upgrade in the man cave to go with a little bit more of a higher, because obviously like B&W speaker, you could spend $60,000 on a speaker. So we're not necessarily going down that road to the true audiophile that knows more about the audio than any integrator. This is more of just a luxury homeowner of how could we utilize the space and give them that experience to make them happy with the experience. So,
well, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, I looked in your bio at one point, and it reminded me of one of those. Let's just be blunt. One of those Playboy interviews where they say, "In his free time, Joe enjoys surfing at sunrise."
Oh, yeah.
All right, so I got to ask you about surfing. I know a couple of guys in the industry who are surfers out west or in Hawaii.
Yep.
Were you a surfer on the East Coast before you moved out west?
I wouldn't call myself a surfer on the East Coast. So what happened was this: I was just about to turn 40. And I'm a New Yorker. I never physically saw a surfer before in my life. I never actually saw one. I've seen them on TV and all that, right?
Yeah.
So my wife and I were in Oregon, and I think this is right when we had kids or before we had kids. I can't really remember. And I remember doing a hike with her in Cannon Beach, Oregon. And when we got to the top of this really beautiful mountain, I looked down at the ocean, and because it was right on the coast, I saw surfers surfing in the water, and I'm like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I've never actually seen a surfer that's cold out. They're in a wetsuit. It's first thing in the morning. When I get back home, I want to do that. That was just it.
Okay.
And when I got home, I went out to Montauk, which is at the end of Long Island, and I took a surf lesson. And the instructor said, I can't take you out. It's too big. I'm like, too big? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I could swim. I'm an athlete. Like, no, I'm happy to do it. He's like, no, I can't take you out. It's just too dangerous. It's too big and you'll get, destroyed. So he says, do me a favor, go buy a boogie board or rent the boogie board from the place and just go out in the ocean, have fun, and I'll see you tomorrow. So I did that. I just wanted to be in the water for some reason.
Yeah.
And I went in the water and I just got destroyed on a boogie board.
Okay.
I just got wallowing water. It was like a hurricane swell in New York, and it was just a nightmare. So same thing happened the next day. He wouldn't take me out. Too big. So then the third day comes, I'm like, listen, I'm not taking no for an answer. You're taking me out. So he took me out. This guy's name is Corey. He took me out. And I'm in my mind, it was like, the biggest thing in the world, right? But it probably wasn't. But in my mind, it was like big waves, paddling through the waves. She's like yelling at me as he's paddling next to me, paddle, let's go, push over the wave. Like I felt such momentum and such adrenaline. And then when a wave came, he told me to turn my board around. And I remember he pushes me into the wave and I stood up and I surfed the wave somehow. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, this is epic. I paddled back out and I looked him in the eye and I said, you just changed my life. Just like that, I swear to God. So we get back to the beach and there was a gentleman on the beach filming. And he goes, hey, I got your wave on that wave. And I said, oh, no way. Thanks, man. I said, can you email it to me? He's like, yeah, $100.
Oh.
I was like, oh my God, really? So I ended up doing it because it was so important to me, right? So I still have this funny photo, right? So now fast forward 12 years later, surfing has just consumed me and my family. We traveled in our spare time all over the world, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Mexico, Florida, England. I mean, all over the place. And I love it so much. So that was one of the catalysts for us moving, is not to just surf. Obviously I work, but it's about being in a atmosphere where we can go outside and bike and hike and walk. And the weather's, besides this crazy winter we're having this year in California,
Right.
it's usually nice out. And, being in New York, it's everything seasonal there. So it's nice to be able to raise my kids in a coastal environment where we get to do a lot of fun things together. And so it's great. So I surf as much as possible, and it's a passion of mine.
Well, that really, I think, helps us really well round who you are, come around to knowing
Thanks.
who you are
Thanks.
beyond the work. I always forget to ask folks how they want unwind and de-stress in an industry that can get stressful in its own way. And that now we all know. Next time we see you somewhere, we'll talk about surfing with you.
Yeah,
That's great.
absolutely. It's the best.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Joe. It's really been great getting to know you better.
It's really been a pleasure.
Well, we'll continue to chat, and I'll reach out to you and next time we need to dig in a little deeper on this. So this whole electrical versus low voltage. Yeah,
that would be
great.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, Joe Borress is founder and president of TriStar Electric and Automation in Malibu, California. You can learn more about his company at tristarelectricca.com. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcasts. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com if you are looking to get professional production help on your own podcast at an affordable rate. If you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the weekly podcast wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talks, lighting specialist to Residential Tech Talks.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.